That Monday morning was stiflingly hot, and inside one of the largest tech companies in the city, no one could have imagined that a simple teenager, the son of the cook who prepared lunch for the employees, was about to change the course of a meeting that had dragged on for days without a solution. If you think talent depends on address, last name, or job title, get ready to be surprised. In the first few minutes of this video, you'll understand how a boy, underestimated by everyone, without a diploma, without a badge, and without a voice, ended up being the key to solving a problem that was paralyzing. Million-dollar operations. The sound of keyboards echoed off the glass walls as experienced engineers exchanged theories, graphs, and projections. Spreadsheets were open. Code was being reviewed in real time. Whiteboards were filled with complex formulas, and tense faces were everywhere. The company's highest-profile project was stuck. None of the solutions proposed in the last 48 hours had worked. The pressure from the board of directors was immense. Every second of an activity meant losses. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Donna Marinalva, her apron stained with flour, finished serving breakfast to the employees. Her son, Vinicius, a 16-year-old boy, was sitting in a corner, eyes fixed on an old tablet he used to study programming on his own. Without anyone knowing, he had been quietly following all the commotion from the crisis that had been dragging on for days. Engineers rushed down the hallway, some sighing in frustration, others muttering technical terms that the boy already knew by heart, thanks to the countless hours he spent watching programming tutorials online. Vinicius was invisible to them. Just the cook's son. No one paid attention to his observations, even when he timidly tried to comment on something during lunch breaks. But that day, something inside him told him he couldn't stay silent. During the employee's technical break, Vinicius grabbed the notebook he always carried and started doing calculations on his own. He had overheard, unintentionally, the details of the failure, a logic error in one of the system's integration modules. The engineers were looking at the problem the conventional way, trying to fix it using the same methods they always used. But Vinicius saw it differently. While the board was holding an emergency meeting, the engineering team leaders were still banging their heads trying to find a solution. The CTO was already considering hiring an external consultancy, which would mean more delays and millions in additional costs. The atmosphere was one of frustration and impatience. Vinicius knew he didn't have much time if he wanted to make a difference. During lunch break, he gathered his courage, got up from the kitchen table, and walked toward the operations room where the engineers were meeting. He felt the judgmental stares as soon as he entered. Some whispered, others smirked. One of the leaders, visibly annoyed, sarcastically asked what he was doing there. With trembling hands but a determined mind, the boy quickly explained the reasoning he had worked out. He said that, based on the notes he had overheard and the information displayed on the boards during the meetings, perhaps the problem wasn't in the external integration as everyone thought, but in an internal line of code that was creating an infinite loop in the requests. The room burst into laughter. One of the senior engineers even slammed the table, laughing and saying, "Now the cook's son wants to teach us how to do our job." Others shook their heads disapprovingly, visibly annoyed at the interference from someone who, in their eyes, had no credentials to be there. Vinicius felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he didn't back down. He took a deep breath and asked for just one chance to show what he had discovered. He said he didn't need to touch anything. They only needed to follow the step-by-step instructions he had written down and tested in a controlled environment. Despite the resistance from most, one of the younger engineers, perhaps out of compassion or simple curiosity, decided to test the boy's suggestion. In less than 5 minutes, the result appeared on the screen. The system, which had been frozen for days, finally ran without errors. The room fell into absolute silence. One of the managers dropped his pen on the floor. Another took off his glasses as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The CTO stood up from his chair in shock. No one could understand how this had happened. The engineer who ran the test looked at Vinicius with a mix of shame and admiration. The boy, unsure how to react, simply gave a shy smile, picked up his notebook, and left the room, heading back to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. But the story was far from over. The board, upon hearing what had happened, interrupted their meeting to call Vinicius back. For the first time, all eyes were on him, not with disdain, but with respect. They asked him to explain his reasoning. Again, he, with his usual simplicity, described the logical process he had followed. From that moment on, Vinicius's name became the topic of conversation on every floor of the company. His mother, the cook, couldn't hide her pride and the tears in her eyes. The engineers who had mocked him earlier now wondered how they had missed such a crucial detail that only a teenager, with keen eyes and an open mind, had managed to see. And if you think the story ends here, rest assured that the next events will surprise you even more. Stay with me until the end, because what happened after that day changed Vinicius's life, his mother's, and the entire culture of that company forever. The news spread through the hallways like an uncontrollable wildfire. In an instant, Vinicius went from being just the cook's son to being seen as the boy who untied the knot that the company's highest-paid engineers couldn't unravel. Every department wanted to know the details. Employees who used to ignore him now stopped to watch as he walked by. Some whispered in corners. Surprised by the turn of events, the immediate superiors began debating how to handle the situation. Some believed it was better to bury the episode to avoid exposing the technology team's weakness. Others suggested it was a great opportunity to show the market that the company valued talent, no matter where it came from. The tension now lay between the leader's pride and the need to recognize the merit of the one who had actually solved the problem. In the kitchen, Donna Marinalva prepared lunch as usual, but now with a strange feeling in her chest. She noticed that employees were looking at her differently. Some greeted her with more enthusiasm. Others made indirect compliments about her son. Amid the smell of seasoning and boiling pots, she tried to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. Meanwhile, in the 8th floor meeting room, the managers gathered to define the next steps. Vinicius's presence in that environment was suggested by one of the few engineers who publicly acknowledged the boy's success. Initially, there was resistance, but the insistence of a few eventually overcame the reluctance of the majority. Summoned by an until then unknown employee, Vinicius climbed the floors with a racing heart. He had never entered a company meeting room before. The walls were tinted glass, the furniture modern design, and the technological devices looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Upon entering, he felt all eyes fixed on him. The chief technology officer asked him to sit down. There was a mix of discomfort and admiration in the air. The meeting began with a formal thank you, but soon technical questions started pouring in. They wanted to know how he had reached that conclusion, what methods he had used, and where his knowledge came from. Vinicius answered honestly, mentioning online tutorials, programming forums, and the many sleepless nights spent learning on his own. With each explanation, the executives exchanged looks, realizing the extent of the talent they had ignored for so long. One of the project leaders, who had been one of the most mocking days earlier, now took notes while the boys spoke. For the first time, the company informally acknowledged that they had underestimated someone solely based on his background. At the end of the meeting, the company president was called in to personally hear the boy's account. As soon as he entered the room, total silence fell. Everyone stood as a sign of respect. The president, a middle-aged man with an imposing posture, listened attentively to every detail. He asked a few specific questions and, in the end, requested a private conversation with Vinicius. Inside the private office, the president thanked him again for the solution presented and offered the boy a unique opportunity to participate as a special observer in an internal training program aimed at young technology talents. It was a chance not given to just anyone. Vinicius, surprised and emotional, accepted without hesitation. When he returned to the kitchen, Donna Marinalva could barely hold back tears as she heard the news directly from her son. For the first time, she felt that her hard work every day was in some way opening doors for the boy's future. The news spread among her colleagues, who celebrated as if it were a collective achievement. The following days were a period of adjustment. Vinicius began attending the training sessions on weekends, always paying close attention to every word from the instructors. Even without the academic level of the other participants, he quickly stood out for his logical reasoning and problem-solving. Creativity. Within the engineering team, the attitude towards him gradually began to change. Some professionals started inviting him to attend small technical meetings. Little by little, the boy gained space and respect. Even so, he never stopped helping his mother in the kitchen whenever he could, maintaining the humility that had always accompanied him. Meanwhile, the internal communications department began working on motivational content, discreetly telling the story of how an unexpected perspective had helped solve one of the company's biggest technical crises that year. Vinicius's name was not mentioned directly, but among employees, everyone knew who it was about. On the other hand, the human resources team started planning a recognition event where employees who stood out during the quarter would be honored. Internal debates were intense about how to present Vinicius's case without exposing him negatively or excessively. They wanted to find a balance between recognition and protecting the boy's image. Amid all this, Vinicius continued studying. He bought programming logic books with the little money he had saved, invested in free courses, and participated in online forums. In one of them, he was even praised by a senior developer from a multinational company who, after reading his account, offered some advanced system architecture tips. His peers, upon learning the story through social media, began looking at Vinicius with admiration. Some asked for help with math problems. Others started asking about programming. For the first time, he felt that his knowledge could inspire others. In the company's leadership, the president decided to create a new incentive program for young apprentices in technology, inspired precisely by the boy's story. The idea was to open space for public school students who demonstrated technical skills even without formal training. Amid all this, a new technical challenge arose. Another system module was experiencing intermittent failures. Unlike the first time, this time some engineers invited Vinicius to join the analysis, listening to his opinions with respect. Although the final solution came from another team member, the boy contributed important ideas during the process. Over time, the bonds between Vinicius and the company's professionals began to strengthen. He started being invited to internal events, participated in workshops, and even received a new computer, anonymously donated by one of the senior managers as recognition for his effort. Donna Marinalva, with tears of pride, watched everything closely, always hoping her son would keep his feet on the ground and his heart in the right place. And no matter how much the world around him began to see Vinicius as a prodigy, for her, he was still just the curious boy who every day after school helped dry the dishes in the company kitchen. But the real transformation was yet to come. What happened in the following weeks would not only change the boy's life, but also rewrite the organizational culture of that tech company. In the following weeks, the company's routine seemed to change completely. The episode with Vinicius had left deep marks, especially within the engineering team. Alignment meetings started to include more open debates about processes, code review, and even the internal culture of respect for different hierarchical levels. For the first time, managers realized that listening to those outside the traditional technical circle could bring unexpected solutions. Meanwhile, Vinicius continued dividing his time between school, self-study, and the training sessions at the company. The instructors began adapting part of the content so the boy could better follow along. But soon they realized that, in many cases, he already understood topics that other adult students were still learning. His learning ability impressed everyone. In the kitchen, Donna Marinalva constantly received compliments from her colleagues. Many approached her to learn more about her son, asking how she encouraged him and what her educational secrets were. She, with her usual shy smile, only answered that she had always tried to teach her son two things: humility and curiosity, and that perhaps the rest was just a consequence. Within the technology department, some of the engineers who used to mock the boy began to approach him more amicably. One of them, a senior programmer named Rodrigo, invited Vinicius to join an afternoon debugging session for a legacy system. For the boy, it was a valuable experience. He watched each line of code attentively, took notes, and to everyone's surprise, pointed out small details the analyst hadn't noticed. The chief technology officer, now more attentive, suggested that Vinicius be assigned an official mentor within the company. Rodrigo was chosen for the role. The programmer, who had initially been one of the most skeptical about the boy's talent, accepted the challenge with enthusiasm. They began meeting twice a week, where Rodrigo taught advanced concepts in systems architecture, information security, and software engineering. Outside the corporate environment, Vinicius's story began to echo discreetly in tech groups and developer communities. A well-known IT influencer posted an enigmatic message on social media, saying he had met one of the most promising minds of the new generation. Without mentioning names, the post sparked curiosity and speculation. At school, teachers began noticing that Vinicius was more confident during presentations. Once shy, he now participated in classes with more enthusiasm, asked more elaborate questions, and even helped classmates with doubts in math and science. The school's academic coordination decided to invite him to a scientific initiation project, which further motivated the boy. The company's human resources department, seeing the positive impact that Vinicius's case was having internally, began developing a pilot program to identify young talents from low-income communities. The idea was to structurally replicate what had happened with the boy. The project received the provisional name, Code for the Future. While the program was being structured, Vinicius continued to stand out. One weekend, during a cybersecurity exercise proposed by his mentor, the boy identified an authentication flaw in a test system. Once again, his analysis was precise, detailed, and fast. The achievement caught the attention of the information security team. This time, instead of surprise or distrust, the boy was greeted with applause upon entering the security team's room. The team, which had previously seen him as an intruder, now treated him as a valuable ally. Official recognition also came. He received an internal certificate for notable contribution in information security. Local newspapers began to show interest in the story. Some reporters contacted the company's press office, requesting interviews with the boy and his mother. The management carefully organized Vinicius's first public appearance. It would be at an internal event with a controlled guest list to protect the family's privacy. On the big day, the company's auditorium was packed. Employees from all departments were present. The president took the stage, told the boys' story, and carefully emphasized how ethics, dedication, and curiosity can change lives and companies. Vinicius was called to the stage and, amidst a standing ovation, received a recognition plaque. During his thank you speech, with a slightly trembling voice, the boy said he just wanted to learn more. That what motivated him was understanding how things worked, and that, if possible, he hoped to one day help other children who also wanted to study technology but didn't know where to start. Emotion filled the audience. Many employees were moved, recalling their own journeys. Vinicius's story became a symbol within the company, a living lesson about humility, opportunity, and overcoming obstacles. Donna Marinalva, sitting in the front row, couldn't hold back tears seeing her son on that stage. Deep down, she knew this was just the first of many achievements yet to come. The company, for its part, understood once and for all that true talent can be born in the most unexpected places. And that sometimes all someone needs is a chance to show what they're capable of. From that day on, Vinicius walked through the company's hallways with a new outlook. More confident, more respected, and above all, more determined to keep learning. After all, the world of technology was far too big for him to settle so soon, and deep down, he knew the best was yet to come. The silence that took over the room after the boy's bold intervention was almost deafening. The engineers, used to dominating that space with their technical voices and absolute certainties, now exchanged awkward glances, unable to hide their discomfort. Some crossed their arms, others looked down at the floor, as if trying to process the fact that they had been challenged, and, worse still, by someone who wasn't even part of the team, the technology manager, who until that moment had maintained an air of superiority, took a step forward. His expression was a mix of wounded pride and disbelief. He asked the boy, in a tone that tried to sound calm but couldn't hide the irritation, "Can you repeat what you said? Are you sure about what you're talking about?" The boy took a deep breath, swallowed his insecurity, and with a firm voice began to explain. Using simple but incredibly precise language, he detailed what he had observed. He explained how the execution loop was overloading the server's memory, described the logic errors in the code, and pointed out the exact line where the bug was hiding. As he spoke, some engineers started opening their laptops, typing quickly to check if it made sense. And to everyone's astonishment, the first tests confirmed it. The boy was right. The simulation showed exactly the behavior he had described. The error, which hours of meetings and failed attempts hadn't resolved, was now clearly exposed by the young man who, until then, had been invisible to the team, the operations director. Following everything with an incredulous expression, interrupted the impromptu presentation and asked for a practical solution. The boy, with the naturalness of someone who had spent hours thinking about the problem, suggested a fix in the algorithm, relocating the function causing the crash and inserting a memory control to prevent the loop from continuing. The development team, with no other alternative, decided to implement the suggestion immediately. The test environment was set up, the code was changed, and with all eyes fixed on the room's main screen, the new version of the system was executed. For the first time in days, the process that always crashed finally ran to completion, without errors. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Some engineers, once so skeptical, began clapping timidly. The chief technology officer, visibly moved and at the same time embarrassed, approached the boy and formally thanked him. For the first time, the cook's son was not seen as an intruder, but as the person responsible for saving the company's most important project. As the executives celebrated the end of the technical crisis, the company president was informed of what had happened. Within minutes, he came down to the IT department, something he rarely did. Upon arrival, he asked everyone present to gather in the conference room. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation. It was clear that a new chapter in that story was about to begin. With everyone assembled, the president asked that the boy come forward. With a firm voice but carrying a paternal tone, he publicly thanked him for the solution. He said the company was witnessing a living example of perseverance, intelligence, and above all, humility. The boy, embarrassed by so much attention, just lowered his head, trying to hide the shy smile that appeared. The president continued, this time turning to the engineers. He delivered a harsh speech, reminding everyone of the importance of not underestimating anyone, regardless of their position or background. He reinforced that in an environment of innovation, the best ideas can come from where you least expect them. Those words fell like a silent blow on those responsible for so many jokes and disdain in previous weeks. In the hallways, the topic was on everyone's lips. Employees talked about how that boy had turned the situation around in a way no one could have predicted. The looks that were once full of prejudice now turned into expressions of respect and, for some, even admiration. The boy's mother, upon hearing what had happened, couldn't hold back her tears. While serving lunch in the cafeteria, she received hugs from colleagues who, until then, barely noticed her. For the first time, she felt that her son had earned a place many adults there dreamed of, genuine recognition from an entire corporation. That afternoon, the board met again to discuss the next step. It was decided that the boy would receive a special certificate of recognition, a scholarship in technology, and an invitation to attend, whenever he wanted, the development team's meetings. The company wanted to somehow give back for what he had done. The boy, upon hearing the news, was surprised. He hadn't expected any reward. For him, everything he had done was simply out of curiosity and a desire to solve a problem no one could understand. But seeing the happiness in his mother's eyes, he felt it was more than deserved. The following days were marked by a silent transformation within the company. The engineers who had once mocked him now made a point of greeting him in the hallways. Some even invited him to talk about technology, trying to understand how he had acquired so much knowledge. Meanwhile, the company's internal social networks began to talk discreetly about the case, always preserving the boy's identity, but highlighting the story as an example of internal overcoming. Some media outlets even contacted the company seeking details, but the management maintained its policy of confidentiality, protecting the boy from public exposure that could be harmful. At school, the boy remained the same. He sat in the back. Rose took his notes, and during breaks, chatted with friends about online games and the latest programming news. But inside, he knew he had changed. He felt more confident, more secure in his abilities, and above all, with a new perspective on the future. His classmates started noticing there was something different about him. Teachers noticed even greater concentration in class, and the school's academic coordination, upon learning of the story, began offering him opportunities to participate in educational projects focused on technology. At home, his parents talked every night about the recent events. Their pride was evident. His father, who had always encouraged the boy to explore the world of coding, began planning how they could better invest in his educational future. His mother, always humble and discreet, made a point of reminding her son every day of the importance of keeping simplicity and the family values that always guided them. Within the company, the boy's story served as a turning point. The board decided to implement a new internal innovation program, open to suggestions from all employees, regardless of their roles. The episode had left a clear lesson. Great solutions can come from where you least expect them. Now more self-assured, the boy began dreaming of possibilities that once seemed distant. He imagined himself one day working at that same company, perhaps as an engineer, maybe as a project leader. But for now, his focus remained the same: to learn, grow, and whenever possible, help solve the problems that crossed his path. As the routine slowly returned to normal, one thing was certain: no one inside that company would ever forget the day when the cook's son showed the corporate world the true meaning of intelligence, humility, and determination. The next morning, the atmosphere inside the company was no longer the same. The silence in the hallways seemed to carry the weight of everything that had happened in the past weeks. Those who used to mock, make jokes, and underestimate the abilities of a simple boy now even avoided making eye contact with him. The engineers who once laughed at the boy's simple slang and shy demeanor now recognized that his intelligence had saved not only the project, but also the reputation of an entire corporation. The glass walls of the meeting rooms, once filled with vanity and arrogance, now reflected an environment of forced learning. where everyone had to reassess their concepts and attitudes, while the company leaders drafted an internal policy to avoid embarrassing situations like that in the future. The boy walked through the development sector with slow steps, but with his head held high. Every technician, analyst or manager who saw him pass showed respect, even if discreetly. It was as if everyone silently understood that the lesson had been harsh but necessary. The whispers in the corners now had a different tone, admiration and surprise at the boy's unexpected turnaround. The local newspapers, which had started covering the story after some information leaked, now had reporters at the company's door. They wanted to know who was responsible for solving the failure that had kept the entire technology team sleepless for days. Even though the directors tried to keep the boy's name confidential, it was inevitable that sooner or later the truth would come out. Rumors were already circulating on social media, fueled by employees impressed with everything they had witnessed. That afternoon, the boy's mother, who until then continued her work in the company's kitchen with discretion and humility, was called to the president's office. There, in front of directors and department leaders, she heard words of gratitude and recognition. Together with her son, she received a formal letter of thanks and a special invitation to an internal event that would celebrate overcoming the crisis. Amid tears, she simply said that all the merit belonged to her son, who had shown an attentive eye for everything around him since he was little. The thank you ceremony was organized discreetly but was full of meaning. In the main auditorium, with the presence of all employees, the company president gave an emotional speech. He spoke about prejudice, the importance of valuing talents regardless of their origins, and how small actions can generate giant changes, without mentioning technical details of the failure. The president made sure to highlight the boy's intelligence, initiative, and ethics. While the applause echoed through the auditorium, the boy stood next to his mother with a shy smile and his eyes lowered. Inside, he knew this was a moment that would stay in his memory forever, not just because of the recognition, but because, in a way, he had proven to everyone that a person's place should never be defined by social conditions or the opinions of those who don't believe in their potential. After the ceremony, the directors opened a new opportunity for the boy, an exclusive mentoring program with access to programming courses, participation in special projects, and direct guidance from some of the company's best professionals. It was a unique chance to turn that natural talent into a promising career. The boy accepted the challenge with the same curious spirit that had led him, weeks earlier, to identify the error no one else saw. Outside, reporters kept trying to discover the boy's identity, but the company decided to protect his image as much as possible. The story became a topic of debate about social inclusion, prejudice in the corporate environment, and the need to see talent beyond formal resumes. In technology forums, developers discussed how a simple technical detail, unnoticed by experienced engineers, had been solved by someone without even a diploma. Gradually, the routine inside the company began to return to normal. The projects that had been paused resumed, deadlines were adjusted, and clients were reassured. But one thing was certain: that story would never be forgotten. It became a milestone in the company's organizational culture. In leadership meetings, whenever someone suggested ignoring suggestions from simpler employees, the boy's example was brought back as a powerful reminder. At school, the boy remained the same. He did his homework, played soccer during recess, and in his free time, explored codes and learned new programming languages. But deep down, he knew his life had changed. Teachers began offering extra support in subjects like math and computer science, and even classmates who hadn't paid him much attention before now saw him as an inspiration. At home, family conversations took on a tone of future planning. The parents, very carefully, began discussing possibilities for scholarships, technical courses, and even opportunities abroad. All still very discreet, respecting the boy's time and maturity. They knew that, no matter how big the talent, his heart was still that of a child. In the company's technology sector, the boy began to be informally consulted on small programming challenges. Whenever a bug appeared or a new update needed testing, some engineers called him over, partly as a joke, but always with the hope that he would spot something others hadn't, and most of the time, he did. The Human Resources Department, inspired by the episode, created a youth talent encouragement program. They started visiting local schools, promoting free technology workshops, and offering opportunities to other young people from humble backgrounds who showed interest in the field. The boy unintentionally became the symbol of this new project. As the months passed, other companies in the sector heard about the story. Some sent invitations for technical visits. Others suggested future internship programs. But the family, always careful, preferred to wait for the right moment to decide the next steps. The focus at that time was to ensure that the boy continued to have a healthy and balanced childhood. One random night, sitting in front of his computer, the boy wrote a small note to himself, saved inside a folder on his desktop. Never let them laugh at who you are. Your mind can take you further than any title. It was his way of keeping alive the memory of everything he had experienced. And now, after this whole journey, here's a powerful reflection for you who stayed with me until the end of this story. How many times have you felt too small, incapable, or thought your voice had no value? How many ideas have you kept to yourself out of fear of being ignored or ridiculed? If there's one thing this story proves, it's that no one can measure the size of your potential just by looking from the outside. If you enjoyed this story, leave your like, share it with someone who needs inspiration like this, and comment below. Do you believe that talent can come from where no one expects? And if you want to keep receiving real and impactful stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because the next video might be even more surprising. And who knows, the next big breakthrough might happen to you.